and welcome to Frontstretch.com's 2023 Daytona 500 coverage. To my right, Dalton Hopkins. To my left, Jared Haas. We just went through very interesting two blue-green duels at Daytona. Dalton, you and I were looking at each other after the first duel and into the second. We're wondering what we're going to write about, what we're going to talk about. You know, they were all running single file in the second duel, and then all of a sudden with Kyle Busch out front, Daniel Suarez bumps him, turns him hard right into the backstretch. What are your thoughts on the wreck and, you know, how it might change everything heading into the 500 with Kyle Busch none too happy about how everything turned out?
Yeah, I'm going to apologize to Kyle Busch because I know this is not what he wanted to hear, but thank goodness for Daniel Suarez, because if it weren't for him, we had almost no storylines really heading into at the end of the duel too. But thankfully, for the 17 laps to go, everything absolutely changed, and now we have this absolute miracle in the high banks, as I like to call it, with Connor Daly getting into the Daytona 500. But Daniel getting aggressive at the end there, that's just super speedway racing, I think. Kyle's upset. He's going to be upset. That's Kyle Busch. And Daniel Suarez said he's going to go talk to him, but that's super speedway racing. I would expect the same thing on Sunday.
Yeah, Daniel was apologetic after, and he said that he was going to talk to Kyle before Sunday's 500, but also said that he was getting bumped by Kyle Larson, and he felt like he needed to get aggressive. It was getting down to the final laps, and, you know, he certainly wanted to win the duel. But the crazy thing that happened in that wreck, Austin Hill and Travis Pastrana behind the incident. Travis makes contact with Austin. Both cars can't finish the race, which means Connor Daly, whose car started the race, looked like it lost a shock or something, like it was bouncing up and down like crazy. You know, I never really seen that before, even with the next gen and all some of the weird things we saw in year one. He comes out of nowhere and he actually qualifies for his first 500.
It was the perfect storm for Connor Daly. You and I were listening to the radio chatter on Connor, and it was almost just sheer panic every time he was on the radio, talking about how loose the car was and so much frustration on the car. Tony Aric Jr. just kept saying, it's not over yet, just keep going. It's not over yet, we got a long way to go. And then with 17 laps to go, that absolute miracle occurs. Austin Hill gets hit by Travis Pastrana. They both get damaged. Thankfully, one of the few cars that actually were out of the race after that crash. And Connor Daly's so far back, he just strolls right on through, takes that last spot in the Daytona 500. So an absolute miracle. The team is absolutely thrilled. There's so much joy in that 50 camp, and at the same time, 62 camp. You hate to see it, but some cars got to go home.
So much joy after. You need to see Dalton's video on this channel. People coming up and kissing Tony Aric Jr. as Connor Daly takes that 50 car. It's the second straight year the 50 car has had this weird way to make it through to the Daytona 500. Kaz did the same thing last year. We'll see if Connor Daly can better that performance. Now, Jared, want to bring you into the fold to talk about the winner of Duel 2. He's not necessarily the most outspoken guy, so it's easy to forget who actually won that race. Aric Almirola came through and had another solid effort with the 10 car. After some solid racing out in LA, it looks like this 10 team is starting off strong, and he's got a lot of great history here at Daytona.
Absolutely. I think the big thing with Aric Almirola is persistence. Aric Almirola is not going to be the one that's making the flashy moves. He's not going to be someone that's going to bump him real hard, create an incident that happened on the back straightaway between Daniel Suarez and Kyle Busch. He'll be up there, take advantages of those situations where the leader's wrecks, and he's had an opportunity. He's won a duel before, and then he was close to winning Daytona 500 a few years ago until the final lap into turn 3, he wrecked. But Aric Almirola has a quiet track record of being a consistent super speedway racer. So, not going to be a favorite to win the Daytona 500. He said in the post-race presser that he was more focused on speed and handling, as we can tell with Alex Bowman. Not necessarily speed equals the best car in the draft. You want to make sure you have a good handling car. It's going to be interesting to see how Almirola can transition all this speed that he has into a Daytona 500 trophy.
Yes, 200 laps, a whole lot more than 60. And you look at Aric, and last year, him announcing his retirement here, I found it interesting in the post-race presser. He said his family ended up coming to 28 of the 36 races last year, and they got so into it and so into taking everything in because they thought Aric was going to retire. Turned out, midsummer, they were like, you know what, Dad? You know, the kids came up to him and said, let's keep this going. You know, we get to go to all these cool places. They were going to baseball games and really experiencing a lot as a family. So now you listen to Aric in post-race. doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon. It looks like he's going to drive that 10 car for not just this year, but it looks like next year as well. At least that was the indicator in that presser. So let's talk about duel number 1 for a little bit. I know it's really hard to talk about because there's a lot of single file racing. Not a whole lot went on. Dalton, it did seem like at the end of the day, it looked like the Fords and the Toyotas outmaneuvered the Chevrolets on strategy, and that's a little something that we could take heading into the 500. What do you think?
Yeah, something to note going into Sunday, right? The Fords just they've been fast all week. I mean, even during qualifying, I know the Hendrick Motorsports, swept the first row. Cal Surprise, right? Very shocking. But at the same time, there were a lot of Fords up there that seemed very fast early on. We saw on the broadcast, we saw during qualifying, they looked very strong, and they looked very strong tonight. They got some heavy hitters. We just saw them sweep the duels again for the second year in a row, and now we have Joey Logano, Aric Almirola lining up in row 2. It's going to be a very good race for those guys. I think the Fords have figured out the Super Speedway races. This is not the first time, and they've also figured out these pit strategies. I think the Chevrolets and the Toyotas are going to be looking at this and saying, okay, we got to step up our homework on these strategies because this race, Daytona 500 Sunday, is probably not going to be a whole lot of side-by-side racing. We might see a lot of train racing, a lot of pit strategy at play as well.
Yeah, the manufacturers all pitting together. And at the end of the day, even though Ford was strong overall, Team Penske ended up leading 59 to 60 laps in that race. Joey Logano, the defending Cup champion, comes home a winner, but Ryan Blaney was also really strong in that race as well. So the other thing that we got from duel number 1, Jared, Chandler Smith had a pit road speeding penalty. That opened the door for Zane Smith to end up taking a spot, the transfer spot to get in the race, and gives himself a spot in the field. It's the first time the Cup champion, Xfinity champion, and Truck Series champion, all 3 reigning champions, are going to participate in the Daytona 500. Really strong run for Zane.
That really tells you the depth of this Daytona 500 field when you have 3 NASCAR champions, reigning NASCAR champions, starting in this field. Zane Smith, a little bit of pressure on that, but Chandler Smith, really tough break. With no practice, he had electrical issues with qualifying, had to put him in a position where he had to qualify. He had to race his way into the duels, and he basically said, I effed it up when he got out of the car, talked to his crew, because he sped on pit road, and with no cautions to bring the field back together, not even a lucky dog to save him, he was out to dry, basically. So Chandler Smith, disappointed how this weekend started, but future's bright with him. He still has colleague racing. He's still going to be racing on Saturday with them, and from what we've seen in college, especially their Xfinity Series program, they seem to be going 1, 2, 3, 4 in the final lap, but they have 4 cars. Still watch out for Chandler Smith during the Xfinity Series race, but disappointing nonetheless tonight here on the duels.
All right, well, before we wrap, I want to ask each one of you, is there a driver in either of these duels that surprised you with the way that they raced that you think will be a factor on Sunday? We can't pick the winner. It's too easy to pick Joey Logano or Aric Almirola, but somebody that really came through the pack and felt like, you felt they worked through the draft well and could be a factor. Dalton, why don't you go first?
You know who kind of slept and nobody seemed to really notice, but he was like hovering in the top 10 during his duel? Corey LaJoie. We've seen him do really well in the Super Speedway races, especially at Atlanta last year. Almost won that race. That was the talk of the town. I think Corey, not only he's racing tomorrow night in the trucks, he's going to get some reps in there. Got some reps in tonight. That 7 car somehow, some way finds a way to be at the end of these Super Speedway races. And Sunday's probably going to be chaos, or probably going to have a high attrition rate by the end of the race. And I think Corey's going to be there at the end. It just depends on who's left, but look out for that 7 car. He's my sleeper.
Jared?
Corey LaJoie is my sleeper as well, but I gotta say, impressed with Todd Gilliland for saving in turn 3 and 4 in the last couple laps of duel number 2. But I want to look at Bubba Wallace for a second, too. He continued with his performance in Duel 1 of being up there in the front. Of course, Joey Logano won. But, again, last year in this Daytona 500, Bubba Wallace finished second. He has a great track record here at these super speedway races. So watch out for number 23. If there is an equation for the race win, it at least goes through the 23 car in 2311 Racing.
I'm so glad that Jared didn't steal my sleeper, because when you said Todd Gilliland, I was like, Corey LaJoie, Todd Gilliland, those are the 2 people I was thinking of. But Todd is on a mission. He just lost some of his Cup races to Zane Smith, sponsorship-wise, who he wasn't running a full schedule. It was announced yesterday. 5 of those races are going to be made up with Rick Ware racing. But when you have a driver like that that's hyper-focused, that knows he needs to win or do really well to audition for not just Front Row Motorsports, but perhaps a future ride already for 2024, he came out strong and knows that Daytona's a great racetrack for Front Row Motorsports. Remember, they have won on these super speedways before, most notably with David Reagan all those years ago as an underdog operation. It's very possible that Todd Gilliland can find the right strategy and the right drafting partner to take him to victory lane on Sunday, and I was really impressed with how he handled those final couple of laps. I know he got loose on the last lap. Wasn't really his fault. He got tapped, but I think he'll be a force to be reckoned with come Sunday. So, this wraps our Thursday post-race from Daytona. Pit Lane LT is where you follow Dalton on Twitter. The real Jared Haas is where you follow Jared Haas. Not to be confused with HaasTooling.com. You can see a funny photo with him in front of the 41 on the Twitter sphere. And for me, you could follow me at NASCAR Bulls on Twitter. Look forward to great coverage all weekend with the incredible Frontstretch staff we have both here and at home. Bye for now.
This is Austin Dillon, driver of the Bass Pro Shops Chevrolet. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also check out one of those 2 videos beside me. Visit frontstretch.com for more racing content.